record on this computer. Hi, everyone. My name is Sorensen-Unruh, and I'm one of your teachers for this track, this DPL track. And I'm here with Cangialosi, and we are going to talk about critical digital pedagogy, and probably open to, because it's hard to not talk about one without the other. Introduce yourself, Karen.
Okay, hi everyone. As Rissa said, I'm Karen Cangialosi. I am a biology professor at Keene State College, which is in Keene, New Hampshire. I'm also the Open Education Faculty Fellow there. I've managed to hang on to that position by a thread, but I'm still doing it.
Well done.
I do a bunch of other things. I work closely with an organization called CUBES, which is the Quantitative Undergraduate Biology Education Synthesis Group. So it's a long acronym. They're way into acronyms.
I didn't realize it was an acronym. I just thought it was some cute moment. I'm sorry. I feel kind of stupid now.
That's really funny.
That's great. Okay. So, and you're also part of DPL. You've been a fellow. You've done stuff on hybrid pedagogy.
I've been a participant at DPL. And I have published in hybrid pedagogy and participated in DPL, and
Yay! Awesome. Okay, so we're talking about critical digital pedagogy, which Jesse actually talked about. He couldn't separate critical pedagogy from critical digital pedagogy. So
that's right.
We're kind of blending it all in. That's fine. Go anywhere from critical pedagogy to open. It's fine. Whatever works. But we're talking about how would you define critical digital pedagogy, and if you is it something you can operationalize, or is it something that you really wouldn't ever want to?
I mean, what a great question. And what does operationalize mean when we think about philosophy, right? Because pedagogy is kind of like a philosophical approach to teaching. And, and I was thinking a little bit, I know originally when we were DMing on Twitter, you were thinking about asking me particularly about critical pedagogy and STEM.
Yeah, and anything you can do that's STEM related is perfect.
Okay, sure. Because a lot of times people say, well, okay, I kind of get critical pedagogy or critical digital pedagogy, but how do you do that in STEM, right? And, my response is always, it's not different. There's nothing fundamentally different about how we would consider or enact critical pedagogy or critical digital pedagogy in our STEM courses than we would in other kinds of courses. And sometimes people think that that is the case, so, and because you teach chemistry, right? When you're working on your organic chemistry mechanisms or, whatever molecule structures that you're like, well, that doesn't have any kind of ideology associated with it. And it's really not true. And you just interviewed Jesse, but it's hard for me to talk about critical digital pedagogy without quoting Jesse and Sean, right? Because they've written about it and they're so brilliant about it. But I love, I was looking at their Urgency of Teachers book this morning, just as I was kind of rooting around thinking about this. And, I love that they say, the work of teaching is activism. And, that really underscores a lot for me about what critical pedagogy is about. And what do we mean by an activist? And as I was thinking about that, I will add that, what I try to do within my classes is to make the work of learning also about activism. And when you're learning, that can actually be the ways in which we can be activists, depending on how we enact what it is that we're doing in our classrooms. So, as Jesse and Sean and others have said, pedagogy, it's not ideologically neutral. Right? You don't go in there and say, for example, how do we think about, how long wave radiation is reflected back to the earth and say, well, that doesn't have any ideology about it. And say, well, yeah, but it actually warms the earth up, and then it can get too warm. And what actually contributes to how much carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere? There's no politics in that.
Yeah, you're like,
So in all of our ways in which we teach, how we teach, the perspectives that we teach are not ideologically neutral, right? And I often emphasize when I've given keynote presentations that, you know, science and data are not ideologically neutral.
No.
Right? You pick a data set. Yeah, how is that data collected? You know,
I mean, if you need a moment on how data is not ideologically neutral, just go follow Hypervisible. Go follow Chris for a while, and you'll be like, "Yep, no, that doesn't work at all."
That's right. For any data, pick any data set. There's some ideology.
It has some real problems with it, I'm sure.
That's right. And so our approaches to science. So you just can't. I don't think you can teach science and pretend that you can pretend, but you shouldn't be pretending that there's no politics attached to it.
Right. Right. No, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So your favorite Sean and my favorite Sean quote at the moment, which I can't find a reference for. It was just that Jesse said it, and I was like, "Oh, that's so good." And I had
Jesse said that Sean said it.
Yeah. And I had heard Sean say it before, and I was like, but it would like reenacted something, but it was like, I think at a digital pedagogy moment, which was when he said that you can't teach you're teaching through the computer, not to the computer.
Okay.
Right? That, there are actual humans on the other side. It's not about the pixels in the computer and how you're like looking at it. And I think that idea of not teaching to the computer, but through the computer might be one of my favorite Sean quotes of all time. And I can't find a reference for it.
Like, when you're thinking
come
about it. Well, just ask him to say it again or put it in a tweet.
I'm just like, can you write this in a blog so I can actually reference it, like in my dissertation, please?
Cite it somewhere.
I would like to cite it for real, as opposed to like a single quote, because it kind of was in there but wasn't really. Like,
it's good.
It's true. Okay, so how do we implement critical digital pedagogy in our classes? So you can do critical pedagogy first, and then talk about the transition to online if you want to.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting, like when you say, how do we implement this? Because again, there is it's a philosophy, and so and I love the idea like that, others have talked about, like you teach from who you are, right? You don't separate the person that you are when you're teaching. And so the way that you implement it in the beginning is to become more knowledgeable about what does it mean. Right? How do you understand yourself as a critical pedagogue? I don't know. I never say it. I never pronounce it.
It sounds kind of like pedagogue, though.
Pedagogue. Oh, God.
Pedagogue.
Right.
It's like, I'm not a god. I'm just a pedagogue. So bad.
I'm a teacher.
I'm just a teacher.
Yeah.
But does that mean it infuses everything that you do? Is that what you're kind of getting towards? Is like, as a teacher, if this is part of your philosophy, it infuses all of what you bring to the table?
Well, I hope that it does. I mean, I aim or strive for it too, right? To have that kind of critical perspective, to think of my act as a teacher as inspiring my students in ways that allow them to, be critical themselves in terms of their thinking about the world, in their approach to science, and looking at diverse perspectives, whether it's like the ways in which, indigenous peoples were the first to really correctly place the equator, and, why was that true? And, or, thinking about how they can, within the classroom, not just learn stuff, but contextualize stuff, right? To be able to learn the content. And and so I think for me, it's about giving my students agency. A lot of us talk about that. How do we allow our students to really have agency? How do we foster our students to allow to think for themselves and to be able to learn the kinds of things they want to learn? And how are we sort of directing that a little bit, or bringing that out? To me, helping students find those inroads to what they're passionate about is kind of at the core of my teaching.
Right.
And that knowing why they want to learn anything, like you can answer that question, like, why do you want to learn this? Well, I have to. You know, why do you want to learn this? Well, I want to get an A. Well, why do you want to learn this? Because I want to apply to medical school. You know, so when you think about all of those questions, why do you want to learn this? Well, I'm actually just really interested in being able to do something that has meaning. And I think it's more often than not that our students really, and it sounds trite, but it's actually true. Our students want to change the world. You know, they see the crap that we're living through. You know, they look at the global pandemic and say, somebody has to do something about this. And they're like, they're science students. That somebody may be me. It's one thing for me to learn about how viruses replicate and how transmission happens. And another thing to think about, why is it that people of color are actually having higher rates of infection than others? But it's all combined, right? I can't, as a scientist, disconnect myself from that. And I think my students they find their ways into that. So when they're addressing questions about what they want to learn and why they want to learn it, and they're thinking about changing the world, whether they're taking on, you know, climate change, I often say, and it's not entirely a joke, okay, this semester we're going to solve climate change, you know, in a way of saying, well, you could actually do something here. And that's where the open pedagogy comes in for me. Because they're not just learning about stuff and writing about stuff, but they're sharing that stuff with others that may actually find some value in it, may actually serve their communities in some way, may provide an audience, even if it's just to their peers in other classes where their friends are like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I had my students, some of them decided to start writing about the coronavirus in December, you know, before it was a thing. You know?
Awesome. That is awesome. That is great.
And so,
I've been kind of forcing them a little bit to at least write about their learning journey during the coronavirus and the COVID moment, but
for sure.
No, it's so that's where I was going. I love the fact that you already went there, but that you tend to treat in your assessment your students as co-creators of knowledge. So do you do public? Do you do back channels? Like, I'm digging in just a little bit on examples.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So a couple of different things. My students primarily use domain of one's own, right? They have their own little slice of the web where they can write whatever they want on there. We talk a lot about the ways in which hyperlinking to other people's ideas and resources make their own work more valuable. They read each other's work, they provide peer review. But on these web spaces, they can put other kinds of things that relate to other parts of their lives, whether it's ways in which they're involved in outside of classroom activities, or the photography that they've taken, or you know, other kinds of communities or sports. And so they start to integrate their lives into their learning in a way that's the greatest hope for these domain spaces. But they also, I have my students using social media. In particular, they use Twitter to try to get their ideas out to larger audiences. And so if you're thinking, you know, practically about the kinds of tools that I use, I rely very heavily on domain of one's own and social media like Twitter, to have Twitter chats and having students linking back to things that they've written and having others read their ideas. And so they feel like when they're writing about, you know, sometimes I have students that are education majors and like, this is how the education system is flawed, and they want other people to see about it. Like, why aren't we learning about climate change in second grade? And you know, why is it that, you know, so I can come up with a lot of examples. We talk about, that's awesome. We're learning about genetics, right? We can talk about the biology of skin color, and then that can lead us into conversations about the social construction of race, the social construction of whiteness in particular. So there's a lot of really interesting and inevitable connections between any topic. Like, you name a topic in science, and there's just a couple of steps to thinking about how that science came about and how it's been contextualized historically and how it's playing out in the world today. And so getting students to think about that. Absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you have, just practically speaking, do you have like a back channel of sorts to help that? Like, is there any private conversation in your classes, or is it all public?
So first of all, there's lots of choices, like, because I have students that maybe don't want to be public with things that they write. So we have, I guess, a back channel between me and any individual student is always present. Like, students can DM me. Well, actually, mostly they don't do that, but they can email me for sure. They can. I do make use of our learning management system in very limited ways. We use Canvas at Keene State. And I do find that, you know, using about 10% of Canvas basically for the private part of the course, because that's what it does well. It locks things down. And so I don't use the discussion boards like I have in the past, but not anymore. But I do have a place for sharing. Students can share files and things with me. That's where they share their self-assessments with me. And we can certainly have messaging back and forth. So back channel between me and individual students. Between students themselves, they may create their own back channels.
And that's awesome.
So if that's what you mean, we don't have a group like, okay, class here. Well, sometimes I've created a discussion board in Canvas that's like, ask me a question anytime. You know, so that it's, you know, it's not, some of it's boring. Like, it's not necessarily not public because there's afraid of having things public, but because maybe the public wouldn't be all that entirely interested in it too. So some of the just structural issues about the class, I mean, maybe they would. But my website for the class is public. I have a website that I have for the class. On my course websites are links to spreadsheets that link to all of my student domain sites. So if you try hard enough, you can find them. They are all public, and students are. We talk a lot about, like, what is the open license? What does it mean? What does it mean to share your work? Is it something that you want to do? I want to really make sure that my students are choosing to do it. I ask them, have you chosen to put an open license on your website, and why? Like, do you want to? You know, why do you want to do it? And then so most of them do. Like, I rarely have a student or two that decides that they don't want to do that. So anyway, so that's why most of the work is out there, and it's public, and they like sharing it. They love when other people read it.
That's awesome. No, that's really cool. I was just asking because we do a Slack back channel, because we have a lot of problems with folks who really don't want to be on social media in public. For any number of reasons, including like stalking and all kinds of
it's like
nasty reasons that you're like, okay, well, maybe I should just have a separate place for you.
Well, and it's also, I mean, aside from the COVID situation that happened last spring, I also, we make use of web tools all the time, but I also I meet my students face-to-face full-time, you know, like whatever the full-time class. I mean, I have taught online, but most of my courses more recently, we meet face-to-face like any other class. If it's Tuesday, Thursday from 10 to 11:45 or whatever, it's still that. We still meet face-to-face, and my students are on their laptops. They're on their laptops talking to each other, walking around, helping. I sit down and say, what do you have on your site? So that the back channel is actually virtually our live conversation. That we're
So you're doing it live. Okay. Yeah.
And so, but when we went online with the COVID, I did a lot of one-on-one Zooms with my students to check in and to try to create that and to be available on email. And so we had that sort of back channel. I didn't want to introduce another tool like Slack.
Well, not in the middle of the semester. No. No, I make them use Slack all the time. That was already in place by the time that COVID happened. So it was like, we also have a private hypothesis group that I use for giving feedback on some of their writing that they wouldn't want my feedback to maybe be public, even though it's nothing horrible. It's like, can you think of a better way to say this? And they just don't want other people to see that. So there's the private hypothesis group, and then there's the public. And believe me, it can get confusing. I'm like, post this public, and say, no, post this to the class group, and then they're always posting the wrong way. So they're like, what?
Make sure you choose the right group.
Exactly. What group am I in? No, I gotcha. We're gonna do some hypothesis for this track. So
And I wouldn't want to leave out, when you talk about like, how do I do critical digital pedagogy in STEM, I wouldn't want to leave out the fact that I just don't grade anymore. I don't, I give grades at the end of the semester, but I don't do the grading. And I rely heavily on self-assessments and try to make that an iterative process and a conversation and a dialogue about grades and ways in which students really become reflective of their own learning. And I've written about this as well in my special kind of hell blog post, where I think the real gold is the metacognitive work that students do when they think about how they become learners, how they learn, how they best learn. And I think that's true in STEM classes. I really think just like if we're talking about STEM, and I often get interviewed as a STEM person because people think it's fundamentally different in some way.
It is, like, isn't it?
There's content.
Okay.
There's content.
Okay.
And it's really hard.
Or at least supposed to be. We could talk about the artificial construct of rigor at some point.
I talk a lot about the ways in which, the like mystification of STEM is super hard. Like, you can't do it because you're not white and male or something.
Right.
Well, I don't know, maybe, but it's like,
seems pretty reasonable.
Actually, if you wanted to learn it, you could.
Yeah.
So it's really not that hard. It's really just a matter of motivation. And I think one of the reasons people remember doing poorly in STEM courses in, junior high school or whenever is because they were freaking boring. Like they just made them just this horrible, torturous, boring, confusing. I can make STEM confusing if you want me to. Like, let me make it really confusing so it seems really hard and that you won't be able to do it. So
well, yeah, I think like I was telling you earlier, I think that I've realized that I'm probably just kind of a data whore. If we can say that on camera.
Data whore.
Because like grading, when I regularly grade, I don't have any context for why you answered the way you did. I don't know if the question was like confusing. I don't know if you were having a bad day. I don't know if you had actually learned that material, but weren't in a place of being able to write it down in a way that made sense. And I don't know if you got it right if you just guessed, right?
Yeah.
So like, it just, like ungrading gives me just a huge amount more information about all of those pieces that really helps me understand the context of where you were when you were learning this material and when you were taking whatever assessment we're talking about.
Yeah. I think if we really want to revolutionize higher ed, which I would like to do, then we really need to do the things that many others have talked about. Certainly Jesse and Sean and Robin talk about these sort of things, but getting rid of things like learning management systems and quality control and profound lists of learning outcomes that I've already carefully prescribed for my students. And
my gosh.
Like all of those things that manage learning. And like, I feel like the potential, given the state of the world right now, right? Like, what is going to cause social change? Like, do we not need things to shift in our world, on our planet right now? And if higher education can't be the ground zero for real structural, systemic, social change in the world, where's it going to be?
Right.
And so if we don't get rid of our pedestrian traditional thinking about how we have to teach in our courses, how we have to use learning management systems and grade every little point, if we can just chuck all that and say, actually, my classroom really is a space for my students to be creative and to solve world problems and to seek out information that can help others and to share knowledge. And like, grade, like, why are we grading that? If we could just get rid of the idea of grading and the idea that people think, well, students won't want to do anything unless they're competing. It's like, well, where did they get that idea from? Where did this idea that somebody has to be better than somebody else? Like the whole thing needs to be, burned down and built back up from scratch. And that is how higher ed institutions could really again, be that ground zero for systemic social structural change that is so desperately needed. And probably why there's so much backlash. Like it's no accident that, you know, policies like, let's just deport all the international students unless they go face to face. Like that's very intentional about not just discriminating against many people of color and other international students, but it's very directed at taking down higher ed. Right? They know they rely on students to run. So why do certain people that are thinking certain ways want to take down higher ed? Because we have so much potential. But you know what? We're not even using it. What we could be doing. So like I say, like let's just stop pretending that we're ideologically neutral, that that classes shouldn't be places of activism, and just start doing it very clearly, very overtly, very explicitly, because what the hell else are they going to throw at us anyway? How much worse could they be? They've already taken all our funding away. They're already doing all of this stuff. What is it that we're afraid of? And that's kind of my, you know, coming from my place as an activist, like we need to be fearless about this. And
that is awesome. I would like to be fearless. Let's be fearless together.
I'm just crazy. And I have privilege. Believe me, I'm a full professor. I have tenure. I have privilege, although my institution could go under by next year, you know, so, but I'm also at the end of my own career. I have some retirement money. I mean, I have privileges that others don't. So I recognize that when I say, what do you have to be afraid of? That there are things to fear for sure. Right. There are. But for those of us that have privilege, you know, come on, you got no excuse. Right.
Agreed. I'm going to stop it there.
Oh yes, sorry.
Because I think we already talked about how the many ways that we break critical digital pedagogy. So I think we covered that. I'm going to stop it there, and then we're going to talk about other stuff. Okay.
Okay, cool.